I guess it's still afternoon or it's evening. I don't know. This is the committee meeting for the Board of Finance for the Purchasing Committee. It's Monday, April 28th at 6 p.m. There are some well, not members, but we have some people on Zoom, Purchasing Director Adam Tulin, and anyone else I don't see. But we're here in the first floor conference room of Sullivan Hall. I guess I'm calling the meeting to order, and will we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The third item on our agenda is to hear an update from the town's purchasing director and the internal auditor on the purchasing policy.
Yeah, so I think Connie is still away, so I think it's just going to be me, unless Tom, you know differently.
No, that's
No.
correct.
Yeah, so basically, just to kick things off, I had a couple quick updates I wanted to share with you guys, and then I ended up focusing in on three recommendations, sort of 3.5, I guess, if we're being specific. But and I hope it sounds like Prue handed those out to you guys. But quickly, I know it was a little bit confusing, I think, the way the information got shared, but when I was rewatching the video from the last meeting today, I remembered that you guys had asked for the sort of quote unquote red line draft of what the Board of Finance had approved back in November. So that was what Jen sent around earlier today. I don't know that it's something really that needs to be discussed. It was more just informational for you guys. As the purchasing subcommittee, you had requested that. So, you know, if you need them printed out, we can get that for you at a later date, or if you can, you know, we just want to review them on your computer, that's fine too. I did end up hosting a training for all the Fairfield Public Schools administrative assistants, maybe like 6 or 8 weeks ago, and that went really well. Just to go over the purchasing policy and you know, how any of the changes might impact them, and it was pretty well received. I got good feedback from them. We are currently preparing a I don't know exactly what to call it yet. I guess in reviewing with Tom, we were noting how there is sort of this attestation clause in the new policy where we're basically requiring anyone who in any way touches on purchasing in the town needs to attest that they have read and reviewed the purchasing policy. So I think sort of my first step with this is to prepare almost like a memo where I go over high level information along with a packet of the policy and send it to all potential users with a sign-off page that they need to send back to us. I think we did have a question about how far you guys, if you have any guidance on how far we should go with that. Do we restrict it, or do we limit it to just sort of like department heads and administrative assistants? Or I mean, we could blow this thing up and make all because the ethics part touches on you guys, it touches on RTM members. So I was curious if you had any thoughts, any guidance on how expansive we should make the attestation piece of this.
Yeah, man, our initial thought was it really should go up to the RTM and down to at least the department heads.
Okay, so I would think everyone should at least see it and know that it's out there and it's been revised. So I guess signing off that you've received the document isn't such a bad thing.
I mean, because the RTM approves certain purchases.
Purchases.
So
As far as like the final purchase, I would think at least like managers, whoever's signing off on an actual purchase needs to be aware of what the guidelines say. So,
Okay.
Peter Tam's gonna sign it.
will they sign it? Yeah, that's what they're suggesting, and I don't think that's a bad thing that they've seen the policy
Yeah.
because,
I don't know, Adam is thinking maybe there'll be some kind of memorandum that basically says, here's the document, please confirm that you read it, understand it, and comply with it. And that may be an annual thing, I don't know.
there could be some type of, like a memo or guideline gets handed out with the purchasing policy that references you to certain sections of the policy if you have further questions.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And I think along the lines of what Tom was just saying, I think I might reach out to HR and just see if they have any best practice recommendations on other policies that need does it need an annual refresher, or, is it something we just do? I mean, I tend to think repetition is key, is important. So people can't claim, ignorance to the rules. But do we need a formal acknowledgement every single year? I don't know.
Like from people like the RTM, I would say no, but maybe every time there's a new RTM, it wouldn't be bad to review the policy with them. So probably if you did it every other November, December, that would work. I forget when they take their visit. I guess it's December, their first meeting. So December, January, sometime in that time frame.
Sounds good to me.
And then it wouldn't be every year. And then with staff, that might be a little bit more frequent, or at least whenever there's turnover, you would want to refresh it, and then maybe every year or two.
It wouldn't be a bad idea if I could get on HR's radar, as to be almost like a part of onboarding for new employees.
Definitely.
Maybe not necessary for, I don't know, that's not even true. There are, sort of, I don't know what their appropriate terms are, but there's people out in the field that do, need to make purchases on behalf of the town. So it could be almost anybody could in some way get in touch, come in contact with the purchasing policy. So I'll talk to them about that. I think that's a good idea. So I'm happy to get right into my sort of 3.5 recommendations if you want me
That'd be
to, or
great.
if you, and these are things sorry.
I just wanted to check, did anyone else have anything they wanted to comment on first, or?
On the ethics part?
Well, I think he said explain that a little bit further, right?
Yeah, so that's one of the three things is the administration had asked me last summer, they updated the town ethics policy. So they wanted to make sure that it didn't conflict with anything in the new purchasing policy. And the initial idea they had was to just, basically strike any reference to ethics in the purchasing policy and just refer to the town ethics policy. And in some ways that's fine, but I was looking at it again, and I think the best way to do this, and again, open to recommendations, but what I've laid out on this document that I hope you have, the new ethics policy is like 14 pages long. I don't think that makes sense to just plop right on the 5th page of our new policy. So what I thought made more sense is if you look, there's a couple subsections within section 1 that I think it could make sense to just make a sort of passing reference or an incorporation, and then maybe we add the full policy as an exhibit at the end of the document. So specifically, there's section 1.5 has these sort of like little bullet point blurbs for related town policies. So I thought we could either, put together a quick 1 or 2 sentence summary about the importance of conflict of interest in procurement, there, or a few spots later in section 1.8, there's just an incorporation of Exhibit A. Maybe we just, refer to an Exhibit B, town ethics policy in section 1.8. And just basically strike section 1.4 as it stands now. So I was just trying to figure out the most efficient way to do it. If you have other thoughts, I'm happy to talk about it. So again, so basically strike 1.4 and then either incorporate it in 1.5 or 1.8 and attach the full policy to the exhibits is my proposal.
I didn't study the ethics portion of this too thoroughly before this meeting. There's a lot of overlap between the ethics policy and the language that's in the purchasing policy.
Yeah, and it's kind of, interestingly that, this is largely, I think, like an internal employee document, but I think it's still good to have in there. But the attachments to the ethics policy, there's attachment A, B, and C. Attachment C is just the section of the town charter on ethics, which we already have in the purchasing policy elsewhere. And yeah, attachment B is it's a document for employees that want to engage in outside employment. But other than that, yeah, it is like a lot of what was in section 1.4 is in here, but I think the idea was let's not have different things under the title ethics policy in different documents.
I agree.
We agree with that.
Yeah.
So I don't have the policy in front of me, so when you refer to 1.4 or 1.5, I can't actually see that right now.
Oh,
But
okay.
I think we should stick to the original plan, which was to
So I
not
think
have it in
you
both.
handed it out, the new ethics policy.
You're holding it, I think.
No, he's talking about
That's
the
purchasing.
whole purchase thing.
I'm doing the purchase policy because
Oh.
right now he's suggesting that we have overlap between the purchasing policy and the ethics policy. And the question, I think, is whether or not we just refer to the ethics policy and not have it in both places. And I kind of agree with that. Yeah.
My concern with having partial language in one and then the full policy here is that they could be construed differently.
Yeah.
And that's not ideal, and people should be reading the ethics policy.
Yeah.
So-
And this is the latest and greatest approved, right?
I think so.
This is the one that we all want to.
Yeah, who wrote the ethics policy? And
As far as I know, it was, I mean, from my perspective, Christine Brown, the chief of staff, and the HR department worked on this last year. So I'm not sure who gets the official authorship of it, but
okay. Okay, and so this is the town policy that's put in place.
Yeah.
So
But what is done with this today? Where does this ethics policy sit, and who is the one that's actually making sure that everybody reads it, signs it? Who's in charge of the ethics policy? Is that under your responsibility?
pretty sure it's HR. Pretty confident it's HR.
Okay.
But we do have this in the current purchasing policy, section 1.4 does touch on a number of these. So it sounds like for the most part we're in agreement that let's kill section 1.4 basically, and then just incorporate this ethics policy by reference.
And then you would make it an attachment to your purchasing policy?
Yes.
Okay.
Just looking at 1.4, I just eyeballing it, there's a section that's talking about not receiving more than $75 or kickback in any dollar amount. Is that same language in this ethics policy? In other words, it seems like I think the spirit of them is obviously the same, but I don't know that it is the same.
So there is a section on gifts. Let me see,
The conflict of interest section on page, through, 3 of 12 is very brief, but then there's like this backup that has more, more language.
Discussion of gifts is on page 6.
Page 6.
So there it says not
Yeah.
to exceed 200, I see.
So I think that just, again, militates towards not having two different conflict policies. You know, we should just have one.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what the differences are. So, if they're material or not material, or,
There's if you look at item number 5 under definitions,
Yeah.
it does quantify. In the ethics on page 7,
yeah, I saw that.
But it's at the same amount, right?
Well, that's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to see.
it
Are they
sets up
like-
$200, not to exceed $200.
What, in our current policy, what is it?
I think it was $200. And
It's the same?
Cumulative for the year.
maybe it
Adam?
doesn't make a difference, but I just wanted to mention that I did share the language from the current purchasing policy with those parties when they were preparing the new ethics policy. So maybe they didn't feel the 75 was sufficient and wanted to increase it, or yeah. Sorry, I'm just trying to quickly read it along with you guys.
Yeah,
I think the 75 was for an individual gift, and it was capped at 200 for the year, as a cumulative amount for the year.
Yeah, it says cumulatively.
like I know, like as far as the IRS, they've never wavered from $25 turkey rolls, and that's been forever, so it's, um,
So, Adam, you were saying to take out just section 1.4, but leave,
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that 1.3 wasn't really addressed in the ethics policy, so I thought that was good to leave in there. The, and then again, I would either incorporate the policy by reference in section 1.5 or section 1.8, or both.
so what we could do is, this committee can't make changes to the policy on our own anyway. So when we go back to the full board, we can point out certain differences in the changes we're making and let the full board decide which amount they feel more comfortable with.
Sure.
Adam, do you recall what the direction was when we presented it to the full board? I thought you brought it up then with this, there was, I just kind of remember there was a discussion, maybe it was the chairwoman who had a comment about that.
Yeah, I would have to go back through my notes. I sort of remember what you're talking about. And I do think that this language, not to pass the buck in any way, but just to state sort of a chronology. I think this language, if you recall, I came on in the process when it was already underway. So I think this was language that Joe Centofanti, the town auditor, who the previous purchasing policy subcommittee basically had hired to assist with the development. I don't know if it came from him or Ms. Charlton and Mr. DeWitt, but I do remember that they were supportive of this language, but again, that was before the HR and First Selectman's office started working on a new total ethics policy. So,
So the auditor definitely reviewed the purchasing policy that's in place now and like signed off on it and made recommendations for it.
But do you guys recall whether or not we were leaning as a board? Before we go back to them and suggest something that we've already discussed, were we already leaning towards sort of not having it in both places and just referring it to some?
I don't think we
Or
had
hadn't really had
it
that
wasn't
discussion?
really an ethics policy available, or
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know, or a current one, it was not really considered.
I don't remember a
don't think-
very fulsome discussion on it because
Yeah.
we've gotten the draft that was redlined.
Yeah, I don't remember ever really comparing it to an ethics policy.
Okay.
We can always,
But I agree that you don't want different things in different places because that just adds to confusion and then people don't know which one to follow. So,
quick question, are we meeting as a group one more time before this goes back to the board, or is the next meeting scheduled to go to the full board?
there was another meeting scheduled in May for us to meet
I think it's May 19th.
May 19th, and the hope was to go to the full board in June.
'Cause I was just thinking, I'd be happy, unless any of you guys have the gumption, to really deep dive on, maybe create almost like a T-chart or something, showing what are the differences, so that we can feel a little more confident before we present to the full board.
I would agree with that, so we could actually go home and read side by side the two more carefully and make a decision on May 19th. If there's anything that we want to leave in, or if it's okay to take everything out and replace it with the town's ethics policy.
Sounds good.
So, I mean, we could put something a little stricter in here specifically related to purchasing.
I think that's
And,
some difference that's stricter. Maybe there's a reason to leave it.
right, and I again, without my notes in front of me, I think that might kind of been the view of why they included that language to begin with. So I think that might be a good way to go. All right, so I'll do that for the next meeting. Do you have any other questions on that, or can I go on to the next topic?
Any questions, anyone? I think we're good.
Okay, this ended up actually, after I reread things, I don't know if you remember, I had sort of grave concern about the MRO program. When I went back and reread it, and it's a little bit weird because it shows up in two different sections of the policy. There's one, I forgot to write down the specific sections, but there's one section early on in the document that just kind of gives a brief definition. And then there's a section later on, I want to say in either section 5 or 6, where it gives a little bit more detail. But so I talked with Mark Barnhart, the Town Economic Development Director, about this. And I think for the most part, the language is pretty much in line with what he would like to see. It's a nice, sort of tool in the toolkit for him to be able to go around to local companies, local vendors, and let them know that the town is, doing something to encourage shopping local, buying local. It's got some good protections in there, in terms of trying to keep it under control so people don't get carried away. One of those is that there's a $50,000 annual limit per vendor. And I guess my only question to you guys is, what are your thoughts on that number? I see two sides of this argument where a part of me almost thinks it's unnecessary to have a $50,000 limit. But another part of me also thinks it could be good for certain departments to know that they do have a limit that they have to stay within. So I was just curious if you had any thoughts on that dollar amount, or, so again, this would be, as an example, I think there's these like flower baskets that economic development gets. in the summer every year from Ganem's Nursery. It just makes a lot more sense to be able to utilize that local company. They're able to reuse supplies year over year versus if they were going with a national company that you got to deal with shipping and new materials every year. And there's other examples with other types of local contractors or local businesses where it's convenient and it makes sense to for our staff not to have to have long travel times, things like that.
So could you refresh us where in the policy it is and exactly how the policy works? Because I think,
I also have, the $50,000, the document that I'm looking that I thought was the one that was the final that we'd voted on doesn't have the $50,000. Like if you look at the red line version, you suggested taking it out, and that's what's in the final, unless it's in a different section. So I'm looking at page 6. I don't know what section it is, but page 6, it's like Roman numeral I.
That sounds right. Section 6.
I think I just printed the wrong document, but mine doesn't have the $50,000 limit in there anymore.
Interesting. So originally, what it had was a $5,000 single transaction limit and a $50,000 annual limit. And I removed the $5,000 single transaction limit after talking with Ms. Charlton and others. We realized that actually was potentially penalizing local companies, because that's more restrictive than the $10,000 sort of department head limit that applies to all other purchases. I'm sorry, I don't have the document immediately in front of me right now. It should be in the one that Jen. Oh wait, so I'll have it in my email. Hang on.
So I was referring to, just for reference to section 2, I guess 2I.
Oh, section 2. Yeah, so that's what I was trying to say at the top of this is it appears in 2 sections of the policy. I guess it's section 2I, where it's just a very brief definition, but then there's another section, either somewhere in 5 or 6 off the top of my head, where it gives a more thorough rundown of the program. Let me see if I can get this. I think it's in Jen's email.
it is attached in Jen's, I think.
Is this what you guys need?
I think so.
That should be the most.
Section 6D, which is page 17 of the policy, 17 into 18, gives a little bit more detail.
Okay, I see it. Okay. Sorry, see it.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's just sort of an oddity of the document that it's in 2 places. But the first one is more, like I said, more of a definition, I think. And then the other sort of unique thing that's, I guess, maybe worth talking about mentioning is the definition of where a company needs to be located to be considered an MRO vendor. It's currently defined as a business located in Fairfield or New Haven counties, which was actually a reduction from, it used to be a lot more expansive. And I didn't really understand why we were, calling companies that were sort of beyond that radius, why they might get, preferential treatment. So.
Yeah, I agree. I would have thought it would be just Fairfield. I didn't even know it was open to the county.
Right.
This was talked about a bit with the previous members of the purchasing policy subcommittee. Where do you draw the line? I mean, there's times where it does make sense to go with a company in Bridgeport or Westport or, But yeah, I mean, I live all the way out in Guilford. Might not make sense that's technically New Haven County, but might not make sense
Yeah,
for that to be a
we
local
wouldn't want
MRO
someone
company.
driving all the way there just to get one special part or something possibly.
Yes, doing that drive every day, I can confirm that.
Um,
So yeah, I mean, that could be another thing we talk about, maybe tightening up, maybe just restricting it to Fairfield County or something like that. Or just, honestly, I have no issue with just Fairfield, but there were examples given where it could make sense to include some of our immediate neighbors.
So I could see trying to help out Bridgeport or trying to help out, certain other communities.
It does say that it's not about helping out the home
Okay.
person.
The
That's
local,
that's
okay.
not the general, that's not the real reason. It says it's when the completion time of a project is of primary concern to the town. And you want to, it says utilizing local MRO vendors within the confines of the purchasing thresholds established herein to be used primarily when the completion time of a project is of primary concern to the town.
Okay.
So it's about not going nationally because you can go grab it locally and get
Okay.
it done faster on
Not
time.
having to have it shipped.
That's how I interpret this.
Okay.
The Barnhart thing is, yeah, I get that, that helps him, but that's a microcosm of this policy.
Okay, yeah, so I could see you're renovating a bathroom and you can go pick up the bathroom plumbing supplies in a local town, a local facility, faster than you could have something big and bulky shipped.
Yeah.
And I could see that, and, I mean, it depends on, the price, like, what you're gonna pay versus what
Yeah.
shipping and the time would be, like, there has to be,
Yeah.
I guess, some sort of rationale to it.
I mean, I don't even know if that is even relevant anymore. I mean, I don't know about you, but I get something delivered to me faster
Yeah, I mean,
than going to grab it in any town. So I don't know if that's just, when this thing was written, that was maybe true. But I don't know if that's
Question is, what
necessarily the case.
policy is it really trying to,
Yeah.
what's it really trying to achieve? I agree
Right.
with that. The time is, you can get it sent from
Yeah.
halfway across the world.
No, I mean, that's a great point, and I'm not sure how many or if any of you are on the audit subcommittee as well, but I know Ms. Saxel has had a previous audit report where this very issue came up, where not to call anyone out or anything like that, but we had maybe I'll keep it generic, but we had a department that was going to a local store to buy a product that, okay, I can't do this without making it more specific. Animal control was going to, like a Stop and Shop type store to pick up food for animals coming into the shelter. And this question came up of, well, couldn't it actually be more cost effective and timely to just get a Chewy, Chewy.com account? So it's sort of exactly what you're saying.
Okay. I would like to get Ms. Saxel's experience on this particular matter,
okay,
because I don't really, she's got real experience on
Yes.
real examples where this is maybe being overused, and I would
Right.
rather, because that example really makes it much clearer for me.
okay.
So maybe we can get her for the next one, or even as a follow-up to this, you can email us.
And I would be happy to work with her on that because, these things that you're saying I shared the same questions and concerns. So this is something I really want to make sure we do right. Okay, so with that, should I move on to the next one?
And maybe it's a matter of explaining a little bit more closely the purpose of it, whether it's to help a local vendor or whether it's to help us do our project better and faster.
Well, yeah, and I think I've mentioned this to you guys
Or
before. in some towns, they have a sort of separate thing, which is a local bidder preference, where you give bona fide local companies, on certain types of projects, basically an advantage where if they're within 10% of a low bid, they can take the contract. Maybe we move more towards that. And in some ways, I think this MRO program is kind of sorry, I couldn't quite tell which one of you said it, but maybe this isn't even really applicable anymore. So
There's language in here after the $50,000 limit talking about discounts that have to be secured in place to get. I mean, that's certainly contrary to the local bidder preference that you're describing. It sounds like you need to negotiate ahead of time a discount with the local vendor for them even to get on the list. So that's,
right.
Again, pulling against, what do you call it, the local bidder preference.
Right. So, okay. So I'll work with Connie in the coming day. I think she'll be back tomorrow. So maybe I'll try and hit her up right away tomorrow while it's fresh.
Okay.
And then can I move on to my last piece?
Yeah.
All right, so I talked a bit in our last meeting about wanting to possibly tighten up the protest procedure, and still proud to say that this doesn't come up much, which is I think I said in the last meeting, it's a testament to the fact that we're doing things the right way. But just from my experience in other towns and a couple close calls that we've probably had, I think it would be good for us to have a really solid protest policy. So there are some references to this in the existing document, but I wanted to just make it a little stronger. The first step is more administrative. The first recommendation is more administrative or chronological. I want to switch 10.25 and 10.28, if you can go to section 10 in the document. I just think chronologically it makes more sense to have specification protest, which means a vendor thinks the bid specifications aren't fair or there's a problem with them. That should be before award protest, whereas currently award protest appears in this document before specification protest. So that's more just a housekeeping thing, but
And I think that makes perfect sense.
Yes. Great, thank you. I didn't make a whole lot of changes then to the specification protest. I thought that was pretty good. The only changes I'm suggesting are in the first bullet point. So I guess I don't know how you want to look at it. If you look at 10.28 as it currently stands and then put my new document right next to it, I want to change the wording a little bit in the first bullet point just to reflect that they should basically follow the same procedure that they would for any question that they might have on a bid right now. So we have an established addenda request for information policy that's included in every bid package, every RFP package. So I wanted to just sort of defer to that or refer to that. And then similarly in the 4th bullet point, I wanted the number of days that they have to submit a protest to match the number of days that bidders have to submit a question on any bid. Because I believe the way it says right now is 5 business days prior to a bid opening date, they can submit a protest, but I thought it should just match the 7 days that we give bidders to submit any question. And then, so I think those were really the only changes I wanted. And then the award protest, I didn't, let me see. I don't think I made any changes to the first 2 bullet points, but then I added a bunch. And they're basically just sort of, I basically copy and pasted from a couple other towns I've seen, and I see a couple language changes I forgot to make, but I can clean that up. So basically, my concern with this previously was, okay, the first two bullet points are great. It's establishing that if a bidder is unhappy with our award, they have 5 business days to make a protest. And then it says, you know, what that protest must say, but then there was nothing else about what happens from there. So I pulled this language from a few other towns, just obviously up for discussion with you guys, but basically establishing that there will be a conference with me and possibly first selectman or town attorney or anyone that we deem should be in attendance. That once we have that meeting, they basically can't introduce any new evidence. They have to stick to whatever their initial complaint was. At that meeting, we will discuss possible resolutions with the person. And then we have 3 business days to make a final decision. And then this was just sort of legalese that I've been given in previous towns that, you know, if they're not happy and still want to sue us, they have to comply with all the above policies. So, you know, do you have any immediate thoughts or questions on any of this language?
No, I mean, you'll clean up all the references to him and his and make it multi, right? And then like select person, town instead of city. It's just a couple of typo things that, because you cut and pasted it in, but that's fine. But I'm fine with the intent of.
Right, it sounds,
Yeah, me too.
And again, hopefully this never comes up, but I have been a part of a couple of them across, you know, 10 or so years doing this, and having a very established policy in place was pretty key. And of the, you know, 2 or 3 times it's come up, really just giving the bidders a structured environment where they could kind of vent for a few minutes and sort of hear what we're thinking of for possible resolutions really ended up being enough. It never went any further. Obviously, I can't guarantee that moving forward, but just my experience, the few times it has happened, like, you know, this was sufficient. Even on, you know, one that did get kind of dicey because we had to make a judgment call on sort of a minor but important issue that eliminated someone from consideration. They weren't happy, but just getting that structured setting to talk to me and the city manager and the city attorney, I think they left feeling a lot better. So.
Good.
no, I agree that sounds like it's reasonable. And is there, so are you gonna put who's gonna be in those meetings or leave it open as to what the issue is, I guess, is my question, I guess.
Yeah. So I mean, from a legalese perspective, my understanding is we're establishing that it will at least be me and the first selectman, and I think that makes sense from the perspective that by charter, the purchasing director and first selectman are the purchasing authority. But then also there's and such other persons language. So again, as an example, one protest I dealt with a number of years ago, it had to do with a water pollution type chemical, where one bidder felt that we had made the specifications too specific to one of their competitors, and then there ended up being a back and forth. So it was really important for us to have the WPCF, foreman or whatever his title was, present in those meetings with us as a subject matter expert. But so the way it's worded right now, I think it accomplishes that as sort of my.
So it will allow someone who's protesting to also bring their attorney or their expert to explain. Okay. mean, because we have to look at this from both sides and make sure. Okay.
Yeah, but again, what the point I was trying to make was like, ideally, this brings a amicable end to an unpleasant. If we're getting to a point where a company is looking to actively protest us, something's not right, so, or at least something's perceived to not be right. So, yes, we want to give them an opportunity to be heard and show them that it's being taken seriously. So,
I
I
think
agree.
that's good. In the past, the Board of Finance has actually, from time to time, received letters from unhappy bidders. So yeah, I think that would be good.
yeah. No, I have a specific situation in mind where it hasn't reached this level, but yeah, one of my first weeks on the job here, we got, there was a paving company who does a sort of unique paving process that doesn't really fit within our town's, the way that our DPW does things. But maybe this would be a setting where, in a formal environment, they come in and state, why our specs are unfair. And we have our DPW specialists there. We have our first selectman there. Maybe some new information is. So yeah, I don't mean to paint it in a one-sided way. I think there's potential for it to be beneficial to both sides.
Okay.
That's all I have for recommended changes. I narrowed it down just to those three things. And so, yeah, so do you have any other homework for me? I'm going to work on comparing the ethics.
So how,
Issues.
I understand this process to be is whatever changes we make, then the hope is that the purchasing policy can stay and remain unchanged for a number of years, and that we revisit it every so often, maybe every 2 years, every 5 years, but we don't want to go 11 years again, but we don't want to have to look at it every year. So is there anything else that could come up that in the next 3 years that we should look at?
Not that I can foresee. Who knows if there's any sort of new state laws or requirements that might come down but I think in a worst case scenario, I might ask to have the subcommittee brought back to life to add an exhibit or something. That's the closest thing I can think of is if, maybe 5 years ago or so, the state added a bunch of new, or actually the federal government added a bunch of new requirements for us that needed to be reflected. Those are covered now in this new policy, but if something like that sort of unexpectedly comes down the pipeline, I might need you to come back, but nothing I can foresee right now.
Well, thank you very much.
Can I ask it?
Yep.
I have a question. So there's a couple of exhibits that look like they're not there, so I guess those need to be finalized.
There ended up being a number of exhibits that I guess basically struck from the final version because they are, well, my opinion is they weren't necessary. They're covered elsewhere. There are things like a non-collusion. I'm not sure specifically which ones you're talking about, but off the top of my head, a non-collusion document.
It was like a new vendor form. I wasn't really fixating on it.
Oh.
There were some forms that are, I think, you're just pending the actual.
Yeah, the new vendor form. That's a good one. Actually, I haven't talked about this with Tom yet since he came on. Previously, we felt that it was worth keeping a placeholder for that, but that we weren't really sure that there was much value to creating it right now based on the current processes. I do know that this was something important to Chairwoman Charlton. But again, with the way the current process is set up with adding vendors to our system, we didn't think it added value at the moment. Just to create a document.
That's fine for me. It's just that I'd like we defer to you whether there needs to be a document, but it's just that the policy's referencing the form, right?
Yeah.
The other thing, and this is
Policies do reference the form?
they do, like they
Yeah,
say.
there's a placeholder, yeah.
You had to do the file based on the vendor's completion of the new vendor form. So it's really just, it's sort of a procedural thing, but it's actually specifying the form, and it's referencing an addendum that doesn't exist.
So I'm kind of curious about why it's not needed, because to me, like in my firm, that's a standard practice. The first thing you do when you have a new client is you complete one of those. And if nothing else, it's for someone to enter it into our computer system. Because what it does is it just asks name, address, who the point of contact is, phone numbers, emails. And it's an original source document for what goes into our computer, and to get it all complete in the beginning is key. So when you go to do billing or, I don't know, 1099s,
Tax
whatever it
ID, yeah.
is, you have everything that you need. So I could weigh in with Tom on that, but to
Yeah.
me, I think it would be something that should be helpful.
Yeah, if I could maybe meet with Tom this week, and because I think this might be the first time he's hearing about this. So
Yes, but my understanding is much of what's in the system captures that information. But the fact that you have
This is for
an
new
original form
contacts.
is
Yeah.
probably something we should look at, yes.
That
Yeah.
it would be whenever we have a new vendor or new.
okay, so yeah, no, I'm fine with that. Let me work on that for the May 19th meeting, and I don't think it should be overly complicated or anything.
No.
So, okay,
I just happened to pull to a page because I have a question on this page, so that form was something I noted here. I think there may have been a couple of other ones that are referenced that they're either still pending or maybe they're omitted. But the bigger question I had, which is, I think a bigger question, is relating to the certificates of insurance. And so right now the policy is saying that the purchasing department is going to maintain a file of insurance certificates for contractors receiving an award. As a result of the bid process, the purchasing department will review this list annually to ensure compliance with insurance requirements. In the draft version, they had language about the insurance certificates being maintained in the town's financial management system, and you made a comment that we don't have the infrastructure to do that. And we've heard from Connie Saxel too that there's, we've seen things in the audit committee, in the internal audits, where there's been an issue with making sure insurance policies are in place. Last thing is that we've now ostensibly are going to have a risk manager housed in, I'm forgetting the name.
Project manage operations.
Project management. So I guess my question is, does the risk manager role need to be referenced in this policy? And does anything else need to be revised just vis-a-vis where the list is going to be maintained? So who's going to maintain it? Where is it going to be maintained?
So I think the risk manager would have overall responsibility for it, but we also are looking at a contract management system that would have this information contained in it, so we could really monitor it through that system.
Yeah, that would be great. And I think that's
the plan.
yeah.
yeah,
So
I agree. Yeah, this isn't new information. I've talked to Connie about this too. Yeah, there's some possibilities in the current system, but it's a little bit limited. But yes, I'm very optimistic that if we move towards this new contract management module, that it will really move us ahead quite a bit in this area. And just a side note, I'm excited for a new risk manager role to be created, because it is an important part of putting together our bids. So whether those documents, those certificates physically sit with purchasing or the new risk manager, I don't have a strong opinion. I think there's a good argument to keep it in purchasing, but it's more about earlier on in the process how helpful it's going to be to have a risk manager that's really guiding us, because we include insurance requirements in all of our bids, and a lot of times I hate to say it, but we're kind of just guessing sometimes, but, educated guesses, but I'm really excited to have a professional who's really looking at, risk and mitigating that risk for the town, become a part of the bid process. That's just a little editorial.
In terms of like the, who's gonna review them annually and make sure that they're to date, do you want it to be the purchasing department or should it be the risk manager?
I'm inclined to say it should stay in purchasing, but I think it's, when this new person comes on board, I think that's a conversation to have. Sorry if that's sort of vague I think I see the point you're trying to get at, but I think it makes sense to keep it in purchasing is my short
No,
answer.
I'm not sure I was making a point. I was just asking
Well,
a question.
Well, your point being like, does language need to change in this policy? I think was sort of the initial
Yeah.
point. So let me think about that over the next couple of days, but I think it makes sense to keep it in purchasing.
Okay, I'm good.
All right.
Thank you, Adam. So I guess my next question to everyone is, do you think we have enough time for May 19th, or do we need another meeting in between? Or after it, before June?
What's May 19th is when we're.
Is our
the full
next
board?
meeting scheduled? Right, it was May 19th.
This committee or the,
For this purchasing committee. And then I was hoping for our June meeting, which would probably be the first meeting of June, we would go back to the full board.
is Connie gonna come to the next one, you think? Is that the idea?
I guess the hope is she'll be back and she'll be able to.
She'll be back tomorrow. I don't know what her schedule is
We
down there.
can reach out to her and see if she's available.
Yeah, personally, I think the only potential complicator is that her take on MRO. If that might end up calling for an additional meeting. The other things we've talked about, I don't think are very complicated.
Okay. And she has no recommended changes that you're aware of to the purchasing policy that's come up with her ordinance?
No, I'm pretty sure I've addressed them because she and I met a few weeks before we met for the first time. So I'm pretty sure I've addressed any concerns she might have had.
Okay, so then I guess May 19th?
Yeah,
would be
let's just make
fine.
sure that that works for her calendar too, because if we have to adjust it for her, I'm fine with that.
Right, okay.
'Cause I think it would be really, I feel like she's the missing piece, I think, to be able to bring this to the full board.
Is that a Monday? I don't have my calendar open.
It
I
is.
think it was.
Yes.
Yeah, 6 o'clock.
They're
Excellent.
both
That's-
Mondays.
That's my one night of the week this season with no kids sports, so that works for me.
Me too.
Still works for me. Tom, is it still good for you?
My phone's dead, so I'll just take a leap of faith.
Okay, so we'll confirm that date, and then if there's any questions anyone has, we'll get them to you, Adam, before that, so we can button everything up. And then I guess we'll each review those sections of the purchasing policy to your changes and make sure we can tie out like what the changes actually are and if we have any questions. And I think I will try to go back to Lori because she was on the original purchasing committee and just make sure that she understands what changes we're considering and that she's comfortable with them as well.
Sounds fair.
Anything else from anyone else? Any requests or? Okay. So I guess I can call this meeting to an end. Thank you, Thank you for being here.
Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks.